Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I'm here again, day 2 of the last month of furlough before I go back to the Calgary Flying Club. This time I have a microphone because I noticed that the video quality or the audio quality was really crappy on that last video, plus the latency. I'm using Live Studio YouTube so I can just stream into the computer and then put it online. So the video quality isn't as good as if I had a camera, but it works for what I'm doing. So the topic of this talk I'm going to do today is 5 reasons why your license is taking too long to obtain. And this is something that I've noticed with different students that occurs. It's quite common. And I've thought a lot about my role in that, and the student's role in that, and other external roles. And I kind of came down to 5 points that might sort of help determine or fix the problem of it taking too long to obtain your license. And this could be like your REC license, your PPL license, your CPL license, could be your INRAT rating, so ratings as well. But for the most part, we're talking about private and commercial pilot licenses. So without further ado, let's get on to number 1. And this is not in order of importance, but I would say that number 1 in my mind is lack of preparation. And I'm sure that doesn't surprise you. It takes a lot of preparation, mental preparation, and even physical preparation to fly an airplane. And I think you could break down lack of preparation into 3 subsets. One, for example, is when you're learning your private and commercial license, you have what's called the flight training manual, right? And the flight training manual has all of the flight exercises, the same exercises that you'd see in your pilot training record. Everything from, start up, taxiing, takeoff, landings, turns, stalls, spins, all of the exercises. I find that with people who are taking too long to get their license, oftentimes the answer to their problem can be found in how they prepare or how they're not preparing for their license. You have to study the lessons. You have to understand what it is that's required of you when manipulating the aircraft through these various flight lessons. And the flight training manual is an excellent resource. It basically details all of the things that you need to know for any lesson in the background and the aerodynamics and performance factors behind that, so that you can successfully exercise that lesson and gain proficiency. I think a lot of people just scan that book briefly and then, hope that the instructor is going to give them all of the little details that they need. But you have to keep in mind, like an instructor, may have 5 flights a day. So maybe we'll be there for 10 hours and they're highly overworked, and they are supposed to do a pre-flight briefing and a post-flight briefing and what we call PGIs, preparatory ground instruction. That can go a lot quicker if the student has already prepped themselves on the exercises for the day. Even if you don't know which exercise it is that you're going to fly on the day, you should be ahead of your curve. You should be ahead of the instructor. In other words, if you anticipate doing steep turns and slow flight in the next couple of lessons, then why not study through steep turns and slow flight and then maybe into stalls? And then when the instructor sits down and asks you the questions as to whether you understand what the exercise is that you're going to do, it's a lot quicker because you have the information. He or she can fix you with the finer points, and then you can go out and fly the lesson and then debrief. But if you don't prepare for the lesson yourself, and you're putting all of the weight on the instructor to sort of upload the information to you, like a chick receiving a worm from her mother, it's not going to work for you. So yeah, you have to study the exercises, and you have to understand the underlying aerodynamics and performance factors and decision-making factors in these exercises. And that's on you. It's on you, the pilot. I mean, you want to be a pilot, you want to be the pilot in command. Well, you can't be passive about this. You have to be active. So that can slow you down considerably, not being prepared in terms of studying the exercises. As you know, with the private pilot's license, it's okay to do your flight test before you do your written exam, PPAER exam. I do not recommend waiting until you've done your flight test to write your written exam. And for a couple of reasons. Number one is it's just going to allow you to offload the work into the future. Number two is that everything that you should have been preparing for in the flight training manual is detailed in even more detail in books such as From the Ground Up, which describe every aspect of everything that you need to know for your license. Okay, so the ground school, which you need 40 hours for private, 80 hours for commercial, that, depending on how you do that ground school, whether you do like a Harv's Air online course or whether you do an in-person ground school course or however you do it, that's going to get you your recommend for the exam. Okay, and so you can sit there and you can phone it in with the ground school, get your 40 hours. That doesn't mean you're going to pass the exam. And it certainly doesn't mean that you're going to be an informed pilot when you go flying with your instructor. So I strongly recommend that you use ground school in conjunction with the texts and any online resources and the flight training manual to make yourself be as informed as possible as you fly your dual lessons and your solo work. So in other words, plan to get that exam done well before you do your flight test. It's just going to make your flight test go better. And it's going to save you time and money. You have to be committed to learning the material. You have to be committed. I mean, you know, we're not talking rocket science here, but as I like to say, it's the next best thing to it. This is complicated stuff. So if you're just dialing it in and waiting and hoping for the best, it's just going to cost you more money and more time and frustration. And ultimately, you may not achieve your goal at all. The third thing that I find under the rubric of lack of preparation is the lack of abilities with some student pilots to do any sort of flight planning or weather discernment. If I could have a nickel for every time I had a student text me or call me or ask me, is it okay to fly today weather-wise, you know, I'd be a rich man. It's up to you to study all of the subjects surrounding aviation and to act like a PIC right from the get-go. Sure, you may be developing skills. Sure, your stick and rudder skills may be in the formative stage, but this you have total control over. And it really makes a huge difference in your performance while flying. So understand flight planning. Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there? Are there procedures to get out of your airfield and back into your airfield? What's the weather? What's the weather going to be like? Is it within limits? Is it out of limits? Are you going to have a short lesson? Is it going to be cut short? Would you be in trouble? Well, of course, the flight instructor is going to make sure 99% of the time that these things are covered and taken care of. But it's pretty pathetic if you're just the passive, are we going to fly today, sir, type of student pilot and just looking to your instructor for all the answers. You know, it's not going to work out for you in the long run. You have to be proactive. You have to be keen and interested in the subjects, all of the subjects surrounding aviation, in order to excel and to get to where you want to go as quickly as possible, because there are so many factors that are out of your control. Why wouldn't you take absolute control over those things that you can? So that all falls under the rubric of lack of preparation, which is number one. Number four, or I should say number two. I wrote them down in a certain order, but I'm going to skip 2 and 3. So number 2 is your internal drive. All right? Internal drive. Ultimately, you are responsible for your education as a pilot. not the instructor and not the flight school. Okay, this kind of goes into what I was talking about with number one there. But you have to have the internal drive to excel and to get your license done. And if that means that if you have a slightly lazy instructor who's, maybe not lazy, but just overworked and looking for a reason to cancel a duel, rather than just passively say, okay, sir, when's the next lesson? You could push back. You could say, look, I only have so much time during the week to do this. It costs me money. I want to stay current. Let's do this. Or find an instructor who's willing to fly the schedule as per. Okay. So really, if you think about it, it's like an athlete. You got to be mentally prepared to win. If you're not mentally prepared to win, you're not going to win. All right. See, the thing about aviation is, it's not how good was your score in the exam. It's not how good was your score in the flight test. Okay. These things don't really matter in the long run. All right. It's whether you finish the job or not. Okay. We all have strengths and weaknesses. But if we don't have the drive to complete the tasks necessary to get the education, to get out there and get your license, well, you're not going to get that from another source. That has to come from within. So internal drive. If you don't have the drive, you don't deserve to be in an airplane. You're wasting your time and money, or somebody else's money, your instructor's time. It's frustrating all around. So think about it carefully. Are you willing to do what it takes to get your license? Whatever it takes. Are you willing to go there? Okay. Are you willing to go up into no man's land, into the unknown, and race through the mud, right, for your goal? Because it's muddy. There's all kinds of reasons why you don't need to do this. You have to find the reason why you need to complete this. Now, something that takes a little bit of pressure off of you as a pilot would be number 3, air traffic control and airspace. Now, this plays a large part in your ability to complete your license in a reasonable period of time. If you're flying out of a small, uncontrolled airfield with no tower, someplace in rural Canada, then obviously, you're going to have a quicker time of it in terms of getting yourself in the air and en route to the practice area and back and get the lessons done. Right. In other words, you're not being slowed down and impeded by traffic and air traffic control and airspace limitations. Okay. Where I fly out of, in Springbank here, we fly under an umbrella of a Class C terminal area. And we have an airport that's Class C. And we have different layers of altitude depending on whether you're egressing or ingressing. Okay. And we have procedures. They're laid right out in the Canada Flight Supplement. As to how to go to the practice areas and how to come back, okay? You need to study that stuff. You need to understand that stuff. Because, in a busy airport like Springbank, CYBW, sometimes the controllers are so busy that they have absolutely zero time for you to hesitate on your answer, okay? Or to acknowledge instructions, all right? And also, you cause a lot of disruption. If you're at the wrong altitude, you bust an altitude, you're going the wrong way to the practice area, all right? So yeah, it's partly on you to study up the area that you're flying in, and it's partly part of the problem with a busy, controlled airspace is it's going to slow you down because most people are not proficient with radio work, and when you're at a busy airfield, the instructions come rapid fire. All right. So you may be in the circuit and listening to 4 other airplanes in the circuit plus airplanes coming in and out. And it's just a constant tirade of instructions to pilots. And one of those will be for you. And you have to be ready to receive that instruction and act upon it. Right. And the thing that slows you down too is that it's intimidating and difficult to communicate effectively like a pilot in controlled airspace. And it's stressful and it takes time. So if you're in a busy airspace, like for example, the Springbank or in Vancouver, Toronto, it's going to slow you down to a certain degree. But the upshot of that is that you'll be much more proficient at highly dense controlled airspace operations. So there are strategies like listen to live ATC online, go to the airfield, sit at the button of a runway outside the fence, throw on live ATC, put your feet up in the car and watch and listen. All right. Get used to the cadence of the controllers. Get used to the expectations of what the controllers expect from pilots. Right. Their controllers, they're amazing. Like they have a very busy job at a lot of airports and they do their best, but they're only human beings and they get frustrated. Right. So sometimes they're going to smack you down when you made a little mistake, and it's going to make you feel intimidated and maybe reticent to go into that situation again. But don't worry about it. They're only human. You're only human. And most times it's just, something that happens and you move on. But it's true that busy, controlled airspace will slow you down. So if you're not interested in that, if you're interested in just being a rec pilot or a private pilot who wants to fly out of a grass strip, then maybe you should really reconsider whether you want to get your license in a controlled airport. Okay. So let's see. That's lack of preparation, number one. Number two, internal drive. Number three, ATC and airspace. And then number four is the practice area and where it is in relation to the airport. The closer the practice area to the airport, the quicker you can get to the practice area, do the lessons, and get back. Okay. It's just common sense. So again, if you're flying out of an uncontrolled airfield, like in Alberta, a great example would be like High River or Old Didsbury or Steinbach South, where Harv's Air flies out of, or Debert in Nova Scotia. These are great places because you get, like, in 2 minutes, you're in the practice area and you're doing your lessons. Also, you fly a lot of circuits when you're training. And if you're in busy ATC space, right, they might not have the room for you to fly in the circuit. So you have to have a backup plan because oftentimes you can't call ahead for the tower and get a slot. You just have to sort of queue up, holding short of the taxiway and ask for the circuit. And many times they'll say yes. And then many other times they'll say, no, do you have another request? What I do as an instructor is I usually suggest to the student that we fly to an uncontrolled airport, the closest one as possible, so that they can get more time en route, more time figuring out how to get into an airport, an uncontrolled airport especially, get a few touch and goes in and come back. But it's costly. It's costly to go to far distant practice places. It's just a fact of life. So, but if you want to be a commercial pilot, you're going to be dealing with instrument flying sooner or later. It's all controlled, or 99% of it is controlled. So you might as well get used to talking to controllers. So practice area proximities, that will slow you down. And it's a frustrating thing. And as an instructor, it's frustrating for me too. But it is what it is. And let's go on to the fifth and last one. And this one's really important, is your currency and frequency of flying. How often do you fly, dual and solo? And how long has it been between flights? Now, true, you don't always have control over when you can fly. There's weather, there's equipment, there's schedule and instructor availabilities. But if you are planning on going all the way, especially for a CPL where you have to do a lot more flying, 35 hours of dual, and you have to do your 300 nautical mile cross country, and you have to do your 30 hours solo, or even the private pilot's license, you should set up some sort of a schedule with the person in charge of dispatch that looks ahead several months and fly those dual bookings and the solo bookings, and make sure that you get solo flights in once you're allowed to go solo. It's true that when private pilots first solo, us instructors are hovering around them like mother hens, making sure that they're safe and giving them the yes or the no as to whether they can go flying in the circuit and then in the practice area later. But we have many students and we're under pressures of our own. And I always appreciate a student who takes control of their frequency of flying, type of flying, whether it be dual or solo, and staying current. In other words, keeping at it regularly. All right. So at least 3 flights a week, if you're a full-time student, 3 or flights a week if you can pull it off. And mostly dual in the beginning if you're doing a PPL, and then a combination of dual and solo. And then as you gain proficiency in solo, you'll find that your leash will be loosened over time. And you can take more and more control over your solo flying. You'll still need to be signed out until you're a private pilot. But as a commercial pilot, I've seen commercial pilots act like ab initio solo pilots. They're like asking me if they can go solo. I asked them, I said, well, weather, no tabs, how are those? Oh, I need to look. Oh, okay. Take control. Okay. Take control. Fly regularly. Okay. Don't worry too much which airplane you fly in. I find a lot of people, they get these likes and dislikes for different airplanes. They don't like the feel of this airplane or that airplane. And, that's the least of your problems. You should be able to fly any airplane that's airworthy, and with whatever avionics package is in it, and you can tailor your lesson for that. Okay. So we have expectations, and you should have expectations of proficiency. Okay. And one of the reasons why you may not be progressing is you're not flying enough. Maybe you can't afford to. Maybe you don't have the time. That's fine. If you want to do the 2-year PPL, slow but steady, that's okay. There's lots of people who do the weekend flying, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But most of the people I'm talking to are on their way to a commercial license. It's like a job. It's like a full-time job where the money goes out instead of coming in. But it'll come in eventually, where you get yourself to your goal of being a commercial pilot, instrument rated, multi-instrument rated. Eventually you IATRA, ATPL, the whole 9 yards. Listen, if you don't take control of your training, then how are you going to instill confidence in the captain of the airplane that you're flying in when you get the job? All right. Now, many people would wash out of the line indoctrination, perhaps. But some people squeak through, and then the true colors show on the job. A lot of us instructors could spot the people who are going to make it within a couple of flights. Not always. Sometimes we get it wrong, but we can usually tell. And we're happy to fly with anybody who wants to fly and takes it seriously. Not so happy to fly with people who are dabbling and indecisive, right? So anyway, it's food for thought. There are ways that you can take control of the length of time that it takes you to get your license, and lack of preparation, being prepared, right? ATC and Airspace, choose your base of operations tailored for what it is you want to do. If you're going to be flying airlines, you might as well work in the controlled airspace, getting your license. Maybe you want to pick something with practice areas that are reasonably far. It's a good question to ask a flight school. How long does it take to get to the practice area? You do the math, you figure out the cost of just getting to and from the practice area. Have the internal drive to get your exam out of the way before the flight test. It's just going to inform you on the flight test. I mean, the flight test has a ground portion, a grueling oral exam before you even get in the airplane. So all that comes from your preparation. And flying continually and keeping current. Very important. If you do all of these 5 things, take them seriously, I guarantee that you will shave hours and mucho dinero off of the cost of your license or rating. So that's my word of the day. Michael McDonald from Mayday Flight Tutoring. I hope you have a great day. It's 20 degrees here. I'm going to go out to the airport. Can't fly. So I'll probably throw on live ATC and watch some people, some of the GA people fly around in their RV7s. Anyways, you have a great day. I'll talk to you on the next video. Bye-bye.